Good day and welcome back to another lesson with Mr. Simons. Looking at cubic functions, and we're doing corrections for worksheet 1,12, which is FP standing for foundation practice. We're specifically looking at how to factorize cubic equations using factor theorem. Now for exam, normally when we ask you to draw this is relatively easy, 2 to 4 marks that you should be able to acquire. Right, now before we start solving, number one, we need to know what to look out for before we start solving. So before we can answer a question, we need to understand what clues we are looking for. And here I've basically highlighted in red the triggers that we'll have to look for. So number one, there's a normal exam question, especially when we're drawing, where we say showing something is a factor. Trigger words, it would say show that x minus 2 is a factor. Prove that x plus 3 is a factor. Verify that. Hence factorize completely. So the immediate thought that should go through your mind, if I give you x minus p is a factor, then I'm going to substitute f plus p. Meaning we have to change the sign. That's the golden rule. So you see minus p became plus p. So if the factor is x minus 2, then x equal 2. The factor is x plus 5, then x equal minus 5. So those are the values that I will substitute. Right, so in the equation, those are the values we'll substitute. Let's say in the question, because over the years I've seen when you read the question, you're not sure what to do. And when we do correction, you'll be like, okay, why didn't we just say so? Because then you'll actually knew what to do. So be careful, you understand what trigger words we're looking for. Instead of saying showing is a factor, we can also just say factorize completely and solve or find all roots. So when we say roots, we're saying x-intercepts, terminal x-intercepts. Immediate thought, once one factor is known, so we're going to use factor theorem to find. Then we're going to use division of factorization and reduce the cubic into a quadratic equation and times a binomial, and then we factorize the quadratic if possible. All right. Now, final warning, you'll lose marks because you're rushing to calculations and you won't spot the hidden clues. So be careful, read the questions. Do we just want something as a factor, or do we want it to be factorized completely? All right, now I'm going to start off with example before I do the corrections 1, 2, and 3. All right, so hope you stay with me and you follow. I hope this is useful. Drop a like and share. The worksheet is available under my YouTube channel. You can go in the description. You'll find the link to all these free worksheets that's available on foundation practice, right? Say foundation practice, it simply means the easier 30 to 40% of exam paper questions, right? So example, given f of x equal x cubed minus 7x squared plus 14x minus 8. 1.1, prove that x minus 1 is a factor of fx for 2 marks. So they want me to prove that something is a factor. So in my head, I have to substitute a value in this equation. If it equals to 0, then it is a factor. Does that make sense to you? So number one, as I said, golden rule, we change the sign. So minus 1 becomes plus 1. Wherever I see x, I'm going to substitute 1. So that becomes 1 cubed, 1 squared, 1 minus 8. 1 cubed is 1. 1 squared is 1 times negative 7 stays negative 7. 14 times 1 gives me 14 minus 8. Right? If we add here, 15 minus 15 gives me 0. So as long as that equals 0, therefore x minus 1 is a factor. Take note, x minus 1 is a factor because the equation equals 0. Now very important that we understand marking. Alright, so in exam, we would give you 1 mark for substituting x equal to 1 into the equation, not negative 1. 1 and then showing that it is 0. Right, so that is how your 2 marks is allocated. Right, I'm going to make sure you understand marking allocation, because even if you don't get the whole question right, there are marks available just for doing correct method and following the correct processes. Right, now let's look at the second question. All right, 1.2, and so otherwise factorize fx completely. So we have to take the factor we got and find the other factors. So here I'm going to use the reverse L method, or synthetic division as it's called. They have x cubed minus 7x squared plus 14x minus 8. So the coefficient of x cubed is 1. Coefficient of x squared is minus 7, 14 and negative 8. So I write the coefficients on that line. Because minus 1 is a factor, I substituted 1 in it. So first process, I carry the value 1 down. Then I'm going to say 1 times 1 to get the value there, which gives me 1. Right? So now I have 1, so this becomes minus 7 plus 1. So minus 7 plus 1 gives me negative 6. From there, now I say 1 times negative 6, which will then give me negative 6. From there, 14 minus 6 will give me 8. From there, 1 times 8 gives me positive 8. 8 minus 8 must give me 0. So the last value must always be 0. My apologies. That is how you know that you've done the problem correctly. Right, so now what do I have? The whole equation breaks up into a binomial and trinomial as x minus 1. That becomes 1x squared minus 6x plus 8. So this will always go x squared, x and a constant value. So 1 mark for getting the quadratic equation there. This there, make sure you understand the process. All right. So 1 mark there. Now we have to factorize the quadratic equation. So factors of 8 that add up to negative 6 would be minus 4 times negative 2 gives me positive 8, but minus 4 minus 2 should give me minus 6. So they have x minus 1, x squared is x times x. Minus 4 times negative 2 gives me positive 8. And they have minus 4x minus 2x, which then gives me minus 6x. So 1 mark for getting the quadratic, 1 mark for getting the factors. Hope we together and you understand what I've done so far. Need to understand this process. I'm going to do it differently as we go along. Right, and I also factorize by inspection. Right. Now, number 1 that's given to you in the worksheet. They say the worksheet is available on Payip. It's there free of charge for you to go look at and work through. And if you get stuck, the video solutions are there for you to use. So number 1, given f of x equal 2x cubed minus 3x squared minus 11x plus 6. Prove that x plus 2 is a factor of fx. So I'm going to say prove that something is a factor. We are going to substitute in this equation and we just get the value 0. Golden rule, the sign must change. So if I give you plus 2, it goes in as negative 2. So there are 2 times negative 2 cubed minus 3 minus 2 squared minus 11 minus 2 plus 6. 1 mark for correct substitution of x equal negative 2. Multiply out, that gives me minus 8 times 2 is minus 16. Positive 4 times negative 3 gives me negative 12. Negative 2 times negative 11 gives me positive 22 plus 6. So I have minus 28 plus 28 gives me 0. So my second mark for getting 0. Therefore, x plus 2 is a factor. Right, I hope you understand. Let's look at the second problem. Right, 1.2. and so otherwise. Factorize fx completely. So completely, we have to break it up in binomial, quadratic, and then factorize the quadratic further if possible. So we already know x plus 2 is a factor. So therefore, I'm using minus 2. 2 minus 3 minus 11 plus 6 go on my line. The first thing I do, I carry the 2 down. Right? Minus 2 times 2 gives me negative 4. Negative 4, negative 3 gives me negative 7. Alright, then negative times negative gives me positive. 2 times 7 would give me 14. 14 minus 11 gives me 3. Negative 2 times 3 gives me negative 6. And negative 6 plus 6 then gives me 0. So technically I now have 2x squared minus 7x plus 3. So this breaks into x plus 2. 2x squared minus 7x plus 3. So 1 mark for getting the quadratic. Then factorizing 2x squared. 2 is a prime number, so can only be 2 times 1. 3 is also a prime number, so can only be minus 1 times negative 3. Negative 3 times 2 gives me negative 6. Minus 1 times x minus 1x minus 6x gives me minus 7x. So 1 mark for 2x squared minus 7x plus 3. 1 mark for factors. So hope we're together so far and you're still understanding. Let's go look at problem number 2 of your worksheet. Right, given f of x equal 2x cubed plus 7x squared minus 17x minus 10. Prove that x minus 2 is a factor of f of x. So once I prove something is a factor, it must equal 0 once I substitute in the equation. Golden rule, always change the sign. So minus 2 becomes plus 2. So that's 2 times 2 squared cubed plus 7 times 2 squared minus 17 times 2 minus 10. If I multiply out, 8 times 2 is 16. 4 times 7 is 28. Minus 17 times 2 gives me minus 34. And minus 10. 16 plus 28 would give me 44. Minus 10 gives me 34. Minus 34 gives me 0. So again, 1 mark for substituting x equal 2 by changing the sign. And another mark for showing it's equal to 0. Therefore, x minus 2 is a factor. Alright? So we test it like this if we want the question to be easier. Right, we will still in question number 6, 7, and so on. We'll look at the more complex way of testing this. 2.2, and so otherwise, factorize fx completely. So we already know from 2.1 that x minus 2 is a factor. So therefore, minus 2, I'm going to use 2. There 2, 7, minus 17, minus 10. Right, so those are the coefficients of the values in front of x cubed, x squared, x, etc. in the equation. So first, I carry 2 down. 2 times 2 would give me 4. 4 plus 7 gives me 11. 2 times 11 gives me 22. 22 minus 17 gives me 5. 2 times 5 gives me 10, and 10 minus 10 then gives me 0. Right, so that means I have x minus 2 times 2x squared plus 11x plus 5. If I factorize, 2 is a prime number, so it can only be 2x times x. 5 is also a prime number, so it can only be 5 times 1. But where I put it is very important, because when I multiply the two furthest items. So 2x times 5 gives me 10x, and 1 times x gives me 1x. So 10x plus 1x then gives me 11x. So 1 mark for getting the quadratic, and another mark for completely factorizing. Alright, let's look at problem number 3. Right, given f of x equal 2x cubed plus 3x squared minus 32x plus 15. Right, instead of us using linear factors, we assist you by saying prove that x minus 3 is a factor of f of x. So number 1, the sign must change. Minus 3 becomes plus 3. Substitute it in the equation. If it doesn't give me a value of 0, it is not a factor, right? So there becomes 3 cubed, 3 squared, 3 and 15. 3 cubed, 27 times 2 gives me 54. 3 squared, 9 times 3 gives me 27. 3 times to the negative 32 gives me negative 96 plus 15. 54 plus 27 gives me 81 plus 15 gives me 96. 96 minus 96 then gives me 0. Again, 1 mark for substituting x equals 3. Another mark for x equals 0. Therefore, x minus 3 is a factor. I hope all of this makes sense, and I hope you now can see how you can get that 2 marks. Right? It's a common exam question. Right? Now, second part, you're going to most probably have to factorize completely. Right? Given f of x equal 2x cubed plus 3x squared minus 32x plus 15. And so otherwise, factorize fx completely. So you already know that x minus 3 is a factor. Now, I'm going to factorize using inspection. So I have 2x cubed. X times what would give me 2x cubed? X times 2x squared would give me 2x cubed. Right? From there, minus 3 times 2 gives me minus 6x squared. But I want 3x squared. So to go from minus 6x squared, I need 9x squared to get to 3x squared. Because 9x squared minus 6x squared give me 3x squared. So therefore, x times 9x gives me 9x squared. Minus 6x squared gives me plus 3x squared. Right, if you don't understand, you can use the reverse L method. And then to get 15, negative 3 times negative 5 would give me positive 15. So they are factorized. I'm left with 2x squared plus 9x minus 15. 2 and 5 are both prime numbers, so 2 times 1. And negative 5, or 5 times negative 1. Again, 2 times 5 would give me 10x. 10x minus 1x gives me 9x. So I'm going to go through it again. X times 2x squared gives me 2x cubed. Minus 3 times negative 5 gives me positive 15. All we're concerned with is the x squared, the 32x automatically will be found once we can find 3x squared properly. So first, see, minus 3 times 2 gives me minus 6x squared. So x times something else must give me the other x squared, that when I add this with that, it must give me 3x squared. So minus 6x squared plus 9x squared, so 9x squared minus 6x squared gives me 3x squared. And they have factorized it. Hope the lesson is useful. In the next video, we'll be doing problem number 4 onwards of your worksheet. You can use the first 3. This is the first variation of how we test it. In the next couple of questions, we will change same question, but we're changing the English. I wish you nothing but the best. God bless. Bye.